Sara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This is super exciting.
So I'm looking forward to hearing about your company, Winnie.com. I'm going to let you describe what that is and how things are going. Maybe we can start with that. What exactly is Winnie, and where are you at in terms of growing the startup?
Yeah, so Winnie is a marketplace for childcare and education. We really got our start with daycare and preschool. We have over 250,000 licensed daycares and preschools on our platform. Parents come to Winnie, and for free, they can search and filter and find the daycares and preschools that meet their needs. So see things like prices and parent reviews and schedules and all this stuff that was just really hard to find on the internet before. And like you said, you can find us at Winnie.com, and we also have apps for iPhone and Android.
Nice. So I know you've raised some capital. I actually really liked some of the titles, the press you guys had when you raised your most recent round, like this from Business Insider. 2 pregnant co-founders raised $9 million for a startup that tackles a universal problem for millennial parents. So obviously you guys are venture backed. I think that's your second round of funding. Is that right?
Well, depends how you count it. We raised like a quote pre-seed round, then our seed round, and then our Series A.
Okay, yeah, there's so many rounds nowadays. It's
so many.
Yeah,
so many.
Okay. So now the other thing, obviously I'd like to dive into your past and how Winnie was built, but even before that, I was looking at your LinkedIn actually, and I was like, you've got a bit of a, who's who. I see YouTube, Google, and Twitter in your background there on LinkedIn, so you kind of really experienced some of the biggest companies. I'd love to go back in time, maybe even start even before that. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I am a Philly girl at heart, which is what gives me my grit. And I went to college at MIT and experienced the cold weather of the Boston area. And so when I heard about this whole, and I majored in computer science, which was the cool thing to do at MIT. I was just trying to be cool and fit in.
All right.
And so after experiencing 4 years of freezing cold weather, I heard that there were tech jobs in California. And I didn't realize San Francisco was not like warm California. I thought it was like, sunny San Francisco. So Google came to my campus and was hiring. And I was like, this sounds great. Like I can move to California. I can be in this warm weather. And Google was like such a cool company to work for at the time. I'm sure still is, but this was, back in 2007.
Were you,
so I took it. I went out to San Francisco.
Yeah, who says no to Google, right? So I'm curious, so even before you started in college, were you a technical sort of person? Were you always interested in maybe programming language and things like that?
I was always into math, but I had no idea what programming really was. Like it wasn't taught at my school. I had no exposure to it. And so when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a math major. And I actually started out as a math major and took a bunch of math classes. But at MIT, it was so collaborative. Everyone was like working on these like problem sets together. And I was like alone doing all my math problems. There was none of my friends were math majors. And I was like, I want to have friends. And computer science, it turned out I could use a lot of my math credits. It's obviously, there's a lot of kind of theoretical computer science classes that are really just math classes. And so that's kind of how I got into it. But I'm super glad I did, because I think it opened up a lot of opportunity that would not have been the same as a math major.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny, math, like I think of an academic career or a teaching career. And then as soon as you switch to computer science, it's suddenly like anything and everything kind of opens up in terms of jobs. When you started with Google, do you get placed like in a department? Because obviously Google is massive. Even in 2007, that was fairly early, but they must have at least had, I don't know, obviously search and AdWords and maps and all these departments opening up. Did you get to choose one, or did they place you somewhere?
So I joined this like interesting rotation program that I don't think they actually have anymore. It was not the famous like associate product manager program. It was this group called Partner Solutions, and basically it was like kind of the technical arm of the partnerships team. So as Google, did a large partnership with an outside company, there would be lots of kind of technical integration work and product to build, and that was where kind of this group played. And so it was cool in that I got to kind of see both the business side of things and also build products. And that's where I kind of realized, especially as I rotated onto YouTube, that I really liked the product building part of it. That was really fun and exciting, and working with like really smart engineers was awesome. And I was like, I want to try this product manager thing. And started, kind of looking at product manager jobs, both inside Google and at other companies I was excited about. And one company I was super excited about was Twitter, because I was a big user of Twitter at the time. And that's how I wound up there.
Okay. Before we talk about Twitter, I am curious too, when it comes to, when you say product, like obviously as a startup founder, that I understand, you have your own product. You're probably the one building the very first version of it. And obviously I want to share that story with Winnie. But when you jump into a place like Google, you're not suddenly responsible for an entire product yourself, right? You join a team who might be working on the entire interface for YouTube, for example. How does it work when you transition from, say, MIT graduate, then you slot into Google or YouTube, same place really, and you are working on product? Do you like get told, here, you're responsible for this little button on the YouTube player? Like, how does it, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like throughout my career, I've joined smaller and smaller companies, ultimately my own, which is the smallest. And
hopefully not for long though, right?
Right. One day we will be bigger than Google. As you kind of go to smaller and smaller companies, your scope obviously increases, and you don't just get to control the color of a button, but the entire product area or feature. And however, there's trade-offs, and you get a lot less help, and you have to do a lot more yourself, and kind of don't have those amazing other team members to learn from. And so I actually think, starting my career at a company where there were really talented people to learn from and network with, these are people I still keep in touch with today, was super beneficial. And I, not to deter anyone from joining a startup right out of college, but I think I learned a lot from being at a bigger company and kind of seeing the right way, the quote right way to do things.
The big way. Was that like scary? Like I can only imagine coming out of college and then suddenly you're in perhaps the most famous computer company in the world. What just even thinking like, am I going to be able to create what they need me to create? That would be my fear, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was a really hard mindset shift for me to go from, in school, you're told exactly what to do and how to get a good grade. You take these tests and you hand in these assignments, and then you get your A at the end of the day. And when you're in a workplace, whether it's a big company or a very small company, you have to figure out what it is that you really should be working on. No one really tells you necessarily what to do, how to spend every minute of your time, or even if you kind of have a general sense, they don't necessarily tell you how to get an A doing it. So that was kind of a big shift, and had to make that shift again, even starting my own company, where you get even less guidance and management. More
autonomy, yeah. So tell me, with Twitter, obviously Google's great, Twitter's great. Why was there a desire to switch companies?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, Twitter was not really great in terms of, it wasn't really a known quantity back in 2010 when I joined.
Fair enough.
It had, a lot of kind of press, and people talked about it, but like when I told my parents, they were like, "Are you crazy? You're joining for this startup like thing that doesn't really add any value to the world. Like, what is Twitter doing to help people? And obviously, like, no one says that now. It's clear, you know, what an impact on society Twitter has had. But at the time, it was just seen as like a place to kind of put a status message and kind of like a joke. And so, you know, like, everyone thought I was crazy for leaving, you know, a pretty established big technology company for Twitter. And in retrospect, that was not so crazy and has, you know, paid off for me in many ways. And I think kind of after that move, I just gained a lot more confidence. A lot of times these bets don't work out, but to have my first one kind of work, be like, look, I joined this like thing that wasn't anything and then became something really major and got to see the company IPO and grow just a massive amount. It gave me a lot of confidence to then take that to my next move and then ultimately my own company.
Yeah, nice. I can imagine your parents when they saw like the Arab Revolution happening because of people twittering to, you know, organize meetups. So it's been, okay, this company did have an impact on society. But with Twitter, just quickly, you sounds like you were early enough. I'm always curious when you do get in as whatever it is, first 10, first 20 or something employees at a company that does have the success of Twitter. Do you, like, I don't know if this is your case, and you know, please tell me if it is, but were you able to get enough early equity that you were very tied into the success of Twitter for your, you know, your potential, you know, future net worth even? Like, you know, you're thinking about this is my retirement money or this could be my house or something like that. Were you tied in that way?
No, so I joined around 200 employees, which was still very early compared to, you know, where Twitter is today. And I think that the thing I always tell people is like, it's not really, you could join a company as the second employee and that company could go nowhere. It's how you think the company could grow from when you join. You know, you could have joined Stripe as the 200th employee and look at where Stripe is today. You'd be able to retire. And so really, it's like, what is the company kind of valued at today and where do you think it could be valued at is kind of the bet you're making. And then, of course, thinking about your equity. And I don't think I really prioritize that as like a young 20-something. And, you know, of course, hindsight is 20/20, but I was like, oh, make a good salary. That'll be great. I can pay my rent. I wish, in retrospect, I had negotiated for more equity, but, you know, it was still a great learning experience to get to be at Twitter through that phase. And I think the most value I extracted was not, you know, the financial outcome, which I think could have obviously been a lot better, but was really what I learned and the people I met along the way.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. It's funny. I feel like it's not obvious. It to me, it seems like it should be, but I'm so immersed in the startup world that it's like, of course, equity is a part of, you know, what you're thinking about as a new programmer employee at a tech startup. But I realized too, if I think back to my 20s, I would not have been thinking about equity whatsoever. It would have been just like, let's find a job at a company I want to work at. And that would have been about it. So, I haven't really heard anything entrepreneurial yet in your life story so far with these first two companies. So you were very much programmer working for other companies. When did the inkling for I might want to do my own thing start to, you know, bubble up in your brain?
Yeah, and I wasn't even I was a product manager, so right. I was kind of even removed from the like actual making of the product in that way. Like you're a little bit kind of higher level in terms of your, you know, spending a lot of your time communicating internally and pitching stakeholders, not even getting to build the actual thing. I never had that entrepreneurial drive. Like I am not the kid that had a lemonade stand or was, you know, had some side business. I was always the type of person, and I still really am, that, you know, wanted to just execute on a thing and kind of achieve. But I liked, you know, not a lot of ambiguity, just like knowing exactly what I had to do. So I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I thought I would, work through the ranks of a company and be a C-level executive someday, but not a CEO. And it really wasn't until I had my first daughter that I realized there was a huge opportunity to build something for parents, and that I had worked with these amazing people throughout my career, solving really hard problems, really talented people, and none of those people were doing anything for parents. None of those people were making, kind of the most important thing that was top of mind to me any easier or better. And I saw that as both an opportunity and also like something I felt, if I didn't do this and I didn't work on this problem, like who would? Like here I was, I had a lot of kind of privilege and talent and a network. And if I was like, nah, I won't do it, I'll let someone else do it, I felt like no one would ever do it. And no one, in the 5.5 years of building Winnie, still no one has done what we've built. We have no competitors, really. So I was right. No one would do this. And we are changing lives. So I'm glad I did. And I think, the impact we can have is still so much greater, but just seeing the impact we've had already, it is mind blowing. So
just to clarify, like, obviously you have a child and there's a lot of problems, no doubt, when you have a child that you suddenly have never had to deal with before. Why did childcare surface as the one you felt was the most desirable for you to even, go after with the startup idea?
Yeah, so it took us a while to figure out that childcare was the thing we should be working on. We started Winnie, and I met my co-founder while we were both working at Postmates. We both had young children, and my co-founder is extremely talented. She's like a designer, an engineer. She's our head of product. She's like everything. And so I had like kind of hooked up with this really talented person, and I felt like, wow, like we should be doing something to help parents. And she felt the same way, but we didn't know what. We just knew like we could build a really talented team. We had the insight. We could fundraise. Like we got to do something here, but we had no idea. And the first few things we tried did not work. They didn't have product market fit. We actually spent, years iterating to get to where we are today. But ultimately what it came down to is like, we can't really solve anything for parents unless we solve their most basic fundamental need, which is the care and education of their children. Like there is absolutely nothing that trumps that. Like if you cannot care and educate your kids, none of this other stuff matters. And so that was really a great starting point. And then the fact that literally no one was operating
going in the space
for the most part, or the incumbents were just so bad, so horrible that it certainly helped that it was just like this huge white space that we felt like we could tackle this and kind of gain traction pretty quickly.
I totally forgot to mention the Postmates connection from Twitter to Postmates to now Winnie. Just quickly, the reason you switched from Twitter to Postmates was, again, just, wanting to be in a new, smaller company, or?
Yeah, I had spent 4 years at Twitter and kind of by that time had worked on a bunch of different areas of the product, and really wanted the experience of like building a team and working with a smaller team, being on the executive team at a company, and was able to kind of get that moving to a smaller company. And it was also, Postmates was a product I used a lot at the time and was important in my life. And I think that's kind of has been a theme for me. Like the thing I work on has to be meaningful to my life. And I kind of felt like I wanted to work on something that I was a big user of.
I like the way you've got this progression from super big company, or reasonably big company at the time, Google, and slightly smaller startup, Twitter, and then even smaller, Postmates. It's almost like you're you're gaining skills, and then you're also, because you're working in a smaller company, you have more responsibility, more leadership. And then, of course, when you start your own thing, it's the ultimate in leadership and being in complete control. You mentioned before, so you're in Postmates, you meet your co-founder, you realize she's super talented. Did it go like you both were pregnant around the same time and you both found yourselves talking about the same sort of problems? Because you did mention that Winnie's current iteration about childcare wasn't the first version. You had lots of things you played around with. Was that something you two did as like a side hustle while you were in Postmates? Or did you fully quit and then raise money for an idea and then pivot to another one? How did it play out in the early days?
Yeah, so I think it's, so first of all, I had just had my first daughter and she had 2 young children already. So when I came back to work after my brief maternity leave, I was like, whoa, this is really effing hard. It is hard to be a working parent. And it has changed my life in these ways that I did not expect. I thought I would just pop out this baby, get right back to work, and everything would be great. And suddenly my whole mindset shifted and what I cared about in life shifted. And this child, my daughter, was more important to me than I expected, and I thought about her more than I expected I would before having children, and I still do today.
Disrupting force.
So we just kind of talked about, parenting. I didn't know a lot of parents at the time. My friends didn't really have kids. And so we just kind of bonded over being parents and working in tech, being mothers. And when we decided it would be more meaningful in our lives to build something for parents, we realized there was no side hustle. As a parent, your side hustle is parenting as a working parent. There is no time for an additional side hustle, at least not for us. And then also we wanted to build a company that we would want to work at as working parents. We both felt like outsiders in tech. And at, Postmates at the time, we were, nursing moms, and we felt like kind of freaks. We were like, we want to build a company where we feel like this is the norm. And we have definitely succeeded in that. That is one of the things I'm most proud of at Winnie is it is just the norm to have children and to be parenting alongside of working, obviously with great childcare in the mix. But we've just built a company that we feel like we could work at for the rest of our lives, which is something that we both was really important to us both.
So it wasn't a side hustle. So did you two quit, raise funding, and what were you pitching at that point?
Yeah, we quit. Initially, we didn't raise funding. And I mean, that speaks to privilege. We felt like there are not many people in the world who can just quit and not have any income and work on what they feel like is important to work on. And also be builders. We ourselves built the first version of Winnie.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
And so we just felt like there's not many people in this position. We've got to take advantage of it.
Okay. So just to clarify, when you say you didn't need funding, is that because you could rely on your spouses, or you had some money saved up from previous jobs, or?
Yeah, both. I mean, we both have partners, but we also have savings, and, I had done fairly well in my career. And so
was there a runway though? Did you feel like you had to succeed in 12 months? How long did you give yourselves to make it work?
We never really talked about that. We probably should have. But what happened was kind of as soon as we decided to start something, there were some people that came to us that we had known from other jobs that were now investors that were like, why don't you raise a little bit of funding? And that was that pre-seed I spoke to. And that kind of just gave us some capital, the ability to hire, and the ability to feel like we weren't eating into our savings if it took us some time to get to product market fit. And oh boy, did it take us time. It did. So I'm very glad in retrospect that we raised, because I think we would have probably been trying to monetize and make a quick buck sooner. And it was really lucky that we got the opportunity to just build a lot of value, and figure out the thing that really created value in the world before we had to worry about how do we make money.
Okay, cool. Forgive me for getting really granular, but I find it very interesting at this phase of a startup. So what was that first seed, like initial investor? Is that angel investing, I guess? Or
it was actually a firm called Homebrew. They invest, or now they, I think, have kind of grown a bunch and invest in all different stages. But at the time, they would invest even pre-product.
Wow.
So we didn't have anything built. We knew the partners at Homebrew quite well from previous jobs, and they were just willing to make a bet on us, really, at the end of the day.
Okay, so they give you $500,000. You go hire a couple engineers. Is that sort of how it plays out in that very first?
Yeah, I think they even gave us less, and we kind of then were able to get other investors along. And so I think in total in that very first round, it was like $500K of total funding, maybe even less. But that was a lot to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic starting point for no product yet, for sure. Yeah. How do you spend that? I'm always like, I can imagine myself in that situation. I'm like, well, I've got all these ideas for features I want to build. You, being technical, can build a certain amount each day. You're only one person, and maybe your co-founder, you said she was technical too, so you both could work on product, but it still must feel a little bit slow. Like, do you think, all right, let's put all this money into engineering, or you're thinking, no, we'll need to save some of this for marketing or something else? Like, how do you think about those first few dollars spent?
Yeah, we put it all into engineering, and we still do. Like, that is where we spend all of our money, product and engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, so we hired 2 engineers. We both worked on the product ourselves as well, and we built a first version in 6 months. We had it launched live in the App Store. And so we could learn very quickly whether this thing was working, and whether it really had product market fit. Spoiler alert, it didn't.
What was that first version? Like, what did it do?
So basically it was kind of like a Yelp for parents. We had all different kinds of places listed in Winnie with sort of information about them and a community. It was sort of the kitchen sink. Although that wasn't really that useful and didn't really do anything well, what we were able to learn from that was that there was one thing people were trying to do in our product that was changing their lives when they could do it, which was find daycare and preschool. So we saw people using the app to search for daycares and preschools near them. The app didn't do that well at all. And it kind of gave us this idea that, like, what if the app did that part a lot better? And that's kind of where we got the idea for what Winnie is today. Okay,
interesting. I've never had a child, so I don't know what I've never needed to go to Google and search for childcare. So what was, before Winnie came along, the current way you would normally find childcare?
Google is definitely one of them. So it's still, this is our main source of users is people just typing into Google, or new users, daycare near me, or preschool near me, or daycare, best daycares in San Francisco, or whatever it may be. But also it's very much still kind of like an offline private network sort of search, where you'd ask your friends and you'd kind of look around your neighborhood. It's still very much done the old fashioned way, and it takes parents weeks and months, and they're left with feeling like they don't have a lot of options, that those options are unaffordable, that there might be a long wait list. Because they don't actually know what all their options are, and can't really compare them without an aggregator like Winnie. Okay.
I can imagine it's a huge decision. Like these are strangers you're going to leave your child with, possibly the first time ever you leave them with strangers. And then you want to know things like references. who are the people looking after your children? What kind of education might they be getting? And then, like you said, if it's going to be handled more in a sort of underground network of parents talking to each other, that's all about trust through reference. I can imagine you're thinking, okay, can we take some of these ideas and digitize that so that there is a resource that sort of has the equivalent? Is that how you thought of, I guess, Winnie 2.0? Because you started as a Yelp, and then because if I think about Yelp, it's more like search results with reviews, right?
Yep.
So, what is that? And that was what Winnie sort of was initially too, is search results with reviews. How does it iterate from there to provide a better match? Like to the point where I don't know how far away that version was to what you have today. Like what was version 2 and version 3 and so on.
Yeah. I mean, parents were really flying blind before Winnie. Like you just didn't have these critical pieces of information that you needed to make decisions. And when that happens, like the demand, the people searching are at just a tremendous disadvantage when there's this kind of information disparity. And what it leads to is certain providers can be way more expensive just because they have better marketing presence with parents, but not actually provide a better quality of service. So we also wanted to really level the playing field, make it about quality and comparing quality, which can be measured on a bunch of different levels. There's just some basic safety information that parents do need to know that they didn't know before Winnie, which is is this provider licensed? Is that license still in good standing? Parents weren't checking that or had any way to get to that information. And we made it front and center. So there was sort of the basic, let's just expose the information that parents need to make decisions, very much what Zillow did for real estate.
Right.
But then kind of the next level and where we're at today is to really improve the way parents purchase care and education. We need the providers on board. We need them on the other side of the marketplace because they unlock the real both information and value. They need to tell us whether they have open spaces and who those open spaces are for and the prices of their program. And all the nitty gritty details about their program so we can make these matches. And they need to be responsive to parents who inquire. And so that has really been the big kind of unlock for us is getting those providers on. And then that flywheel really starts to spin when you have both the supply and demand using your platform.
I was going to ask, actually, being a two-sided marketplace, that's always the challenge, right? You have to have supply and you have to have demand, and often you can't really get demand until you have supply. And can you maybe, because I can imagine, all right, your technical team, you build the platform, you can allow people to search it and allow people to add information. Once it's there, do you then go, okay, we need to create a team that's like an outbound, connecting with all the daycare centers, getting them to onboard the information? Did you create a team to do that, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So I think the advantage we had here is what existed was so bad that even just building the basic directory of every licensed daycare and preschool was enough to be 100x better than anything that existed because that didn't exist. And so that got us the demand. As soon as we started building that and putting these pages up and gaining national traction, we were ranking in Google search. People were talking about us. We were gaining word of mouth traction. People were downloading our apps. And so we kind of were able to solve the demand side. And then the harder part was and is the supply, getting the daycares and preschools on board. And now, we're not just daycare and preschool, we're expanding into other forms of care and education. It's a super fragmented market. And providers are not necessarily tech savvy, not as tech savvy as parents necessarily, may not use any technology to run their business, and much to their disadvantage. If parents are looking for these things on the internet and trying to connect through the internet, it's a problem as a business if you're not on the internet. And I think one of the things that really helped was actually COVID, because it sort of forced adoption of technology. Even providers that were reluctant to adopt technology, like, it made everyone in the world adopt technology in a way that that pace was sort of unprecedented. So really, that was a kind of a game changer for the provider adoption side, and it's sort of only accelerated from there. It was sort of the tipping point event that was needed, I think, to really shake up the industry. And I'm really hopeful and optimistic that this industry is now going to be kind of an internet industry and get all of those efficiencies of the internet that this industry is desperately needs. Okay.
The one thing I'm not quite understanding, though, so you were able to create a directory without participation of the daycare centers.
Yep.
Is that just because that information is readily available? You just have to kind of collect it. But when you say participation, you mean they actually need to go in there and add certain parts of the information that you can't get from directories, plus be responsive to queries and things like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So the amazing thing about like a lot of childcare data is it's public. It's just not accessible. Licensing data is required to be public in all 50 states, but it's not actually something parents can access easily on the internet. So building that integration with state licensing databases is a big part of the work we do. That gets us really only basic information. And so it is really critical that providers come on, and we do have a bunch of kind of automated systems that get providers on Winnie, but also they find us very much in the same way parents do, just through a Google search. That has been really helpful, especially during COVID, when a lot of them had to turn to the internet to run and manage their business. They didn't really have a choice to provide a physical tour. They had to meet parents virtually. And so we were there. Like, we were there when they were all having this moment of embracing the internet. And that certainly helped.
Okay, so I guess I'll encourage all the listeners here to actually head to winnie.com too, because I know part of this for me is like, I can think of a Yelp, but I'm sure there's more layers to how you're presenting information and how people can interact with all the providers. So we can obviously go and experience it on winnie.com. You obviously made the choice to become venture-backed once you had the opportunity. And as I said at the very start of this, you have most recently raised $9 million, correct me if I'm wrong, in whatever round we want to call that, an A round or something like that. I'd love to know a couple of things. A, what do you do with $9 million? Do you keep pouring it into more engineers and more development? B, what was it like to actually be the CEO of a company raising $9 million, which I'm assuming is a little different, like a new experience you had compared to raising the very first initial seed funding? Let's start with those two so I don't overwhelm you with questions at once.
Yeah. So we did mostly spend it on product and engineering. I mean, we still, like, the majority of our expenses are the team. It's headcount, because we are building a platform. There's not a massive operational expense, and there's not, we're not physically building goods that we then sell. So it is the team that's costs the money. And I think, while we definitely, the core of our team are engineers, we, now have some other functions like, folks that talk to providers and get them on board and also help them be really successful on our platform. And those functions are really important as we grow and scale. So definitely, like, expanding beyond what I'm personally good at and know and hiring for, like, which is product and engineering, and really, getting out of my comfort zone and realizing, like, to really grow and scale as a business, we need sales and marketing and these other functions that are so critical. And was it hard to have more money? No.
I mean, the actual process of raising, though, how was that as a
CEO? Fundraising is not my favorite. I think it's tough because when you're fundraising, you're not necessarily working day to day on the business. And especially in the earlier stages, that can be really hard because you don't necessarily have that team of like executives behind you to run the business. And you are used to, being the day to day manager of a lot of things. So that's kind of the hardest part for me is like context switching between meetings with investors, and like all the things that I just need to actually do to keep this business going day to day. Like, going into the office and picking up mail and like stuff, just even basic stuff that you don't have anyone else covering at the earlier stages. I think, it's also sometimes tough because the way investors might want to think about your business or interpret what you're building is not necessarily right. It's their kind of quick split second decision based on like the mental model they have of the world. They haven't been working on this for the years that you have, and they don't know all the nuances. And so trying to get that all across to investors in a short period of time is just, I've always found it really, really tough. Mm-hmm. And I think finally, childcare and education is not the sexiest area for investors. And it should be. It's a massive, massive market, $212 billion industry in the US alone annually. But for whatever reason, probably because a lot of investors are, white men who've never experienced this issue themselves before, or they have, someone else handling childcare for them. They don't feel it viscerally. It just hasn't been a sexy area for investment. And so it's frustrating when you see a big opportunity and what you're working on is huge and life-changing and meaningful. And then you get an investor who's like, I didn't really have this problem because my live-in nanny is awesome. And, it's been fine. Once we found her, it's been great. It's like, that's not how the world works. That's not how the majority of real people in this country operate. So that's probably the most frustrating part for me about fundraising.
If I'm just again reading the information I found about that Series A, it was Rethink Impact was the lead of that round, and it was female led. So I think that speaks to what you're talking about there, having the sense of actually experiencing the problem, so understanding your vision and so on. I've never heard of them. So is that they like newer on the scene, or have they been great partners?
No, I mean they're awesome. Rethink Impact is actually one of the largest funds that invests in women founders. And they've been an incredible partner to us, as has Reach Capital, which led our seed round. We also have a woman on our board from Reach. I think that is like one of the big missing pieces. It's like we need more women in investing roles at the highest levels, like not just, there's a woman on the team and therefore we're covered, but like real decision makers who can have conviction and not need to convince a group of like, that's another thing I found is I would have a great connection with like the woman investor, and then she would have to convince like all of her male partners that this thing was going to be huge, and they'd be like, I don't know, childcare, education, is it really that big? Is it, is it an NFT? Then it would fall apart. And so having not just women at the table, but women who are able to make decisions, who are confident and convicted enough to make a bet in something that is not necessarily male dominated and sexy to men, I think is what we need to see more of. And like, we've just been so fortunate to have investors that have these firms that are not just have women at the table, but are actually women-led funds.
It's surprising. I would have thought, just like you said, the total addressable market size, like how many babies are born is a pretty large market. It's the entire human race, right? So I would have been surprised that they wouldn't have seen the potential for this being like a $1 billion plus company. On that note, so it sounds like, based on the story you're sort of sharing, a lot of product building has been so far your focus, with Winnie, which makes complete sense. And I know you said right at the start, before you switched to actually getting investors, you were thinking, well, we'll probably need to focus on revenue and actually have a monetization model earlier on because we need to be able to make money to keep going. And that's more like the sort of non-venture backed business model. But then you got backing, so you were able to sort of focus on product and not necessarily think about the money side. Where are you at with that right now? Like, are you still just building features, or do you need to show some sort of revenue return now, or how does it look on the runway?
Yeah, so we focused first on value creation prior to value capture, which I think like a lot of marketplaces do need to start this way to grow. Yeah. So we gave away a lot of value for free, and ultimately we realized like we could start to capture some of this value. So the value is that like we are filling spaces in childcare and education providers. We are, putting butts in seats, and we were doing that all for free. And childcare is a really, really expensive purchase. So like when you think about, the cost of full-time care on average in the United States, it's like $14,000 a year. And in some cities, it's like 3x as much. Wow. So, even just filling one space, like that's, $14,000 in annual revenue that business, you're adding to that business. So we started realizing our customers were the daycares and preschools who are really benefiting from filling their spaces and earning revenue faster on those open spots, and started basically monetizing them, getting a take of that kind of value that we're sending them. And I mean, we're still very light on the value capture. In other words, like we're not taking anywhere near what we should be for the kind of value we're creating. But we're kind of okay with that for now, as we grow our network and kind of increase the just overall size and scale of our business, and just become more and more kind of fundamental. Like it's getting to be sort of impossible to do a daycare and preschool search without using Winnie at some point in your process, which is a great place to be as kind of an aggregator marketplace. And so we're really happy with kind of how we're growing in that direction, and our revenue has kind of increased along with our growth. And just in the last year, like we grew our revenue 10x. We're, very close to being a profitable business, like real profitability. Wow. Not this like kind of fake measure of profitability. So that's kind of a great place to be. And we're not in a rush to get there faster, because we feel like it's very close.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Like, it's not easy with the marketplace, especially like you said, you really got to build the value first, and that's hard. So I can see, especially like, I don't know what the profit margin is for running a daycare center, like, what their potential is for giving you guys part of that? Where they start resisting taking on Winnie as a supplier, but I can imagine there's a lot of room. So, and not, that's just like you said, one thing.
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing about like the childcare industry is it varies. Like there are some businesses in childcare that are not even profitable themselves. Like they are running at a loss.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there are other businesses that are extremely profitable. Like look at the $9 billion market cap company, Bright Horizons, that operates, hundreds of daycares across the US. And part of that is we believe technology can help make these businesses more profitable, and help them run a lot more efficiently. And so that's kind of where we see our role is like, can we make every childcare business that is high quality, a profitable, growing, thriving business. And then of course we can share in that. But we should be increasing the profitability of the business,
right.
Not just like taking from the existing profit margin.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine for a lot of daycares, their presence on your site is their website. Like that's the only presence they have online. So
it's that way for about 50% of the providers on our platform, which is insane. But yeah.
It's almost like you're a Shopify for the daycare world, which I would never have thought of, but it's kind of the way you could look at it. It was one thing I was thinking of that it's slipped my mind now while you were saying that, Sarah. What was it? But yeah, so with going forward with the growth of this, is it a case of you managing like, okay, we want to focus on value creation more than value capture, like you said, but at some point do you go, okay, now we're going to switch, we've got such a presence, we've really, I don't know if you're going global or, USA first, but, and then you think, okay, let's switch on premium listings, let's switch on, I don't know, other types of subscriptions you could sell directly on the platform because you have such an audience of parents. There could be other things. Is that the way your vision is kind of like that big? Is that how you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we just really believe in like making this process for both parents and providers a lot easier and better and more efficient. And the value capture kind of comes along with that. Like as we continue to improve their businesses and we continue to make this better for parents, like we just, this is a massive, massive market. There is no kind of question of like how big this business can be. We do believe like it's very important to keep the product free for parents. Parents already pay way more than they can afford in childcare and education expenses. So we don't want to add to that. And we have a great customer in the business itself, the daycare and preschool, who we are helping to make more money. And so it just doesn't make sense for us to charge parents anything for now or the foreseeable future. Like I think we'd have to really expand into some adjacent area for there to ever be something we charge parents for.
Right. Like you're not going to suddenly start selling nappies on the platform or something like that. That's going to be quite divergent. Yeah. Maybe second last question here. Maybe to wrap it up, Sarah. The domain name, winnie.com, fantastic. How did you manage to get that? And where is there an origin story behind why you chose that name?
Yeah. So when we started Winnie, like first and foremost, before we even knew what product we were building, we knew it would be important to have a strong brand. For parenting in particular, like brand is everything. You trust a brand. And this, we knew we would be working on something that involved a lot of trust from parents and really could be something that they would not just use, but remember and share with friends and really believe in. It was really important to us that it be a brand that was, as inclusive as possible. Not just for moms, not just for dads, for anyone with children in their lives, like caregivers, teachers, obviously moms and dads. And a lot in parenting is so exclusive. Like there's just this whole concept of a mother's group that is just basically for women, but only certain kinds of women of certain status. And what that does is it just makes it really hard for other people to participate in the caregiving process and increases the burden on like only certain people to do all this work. So it was just really important to us to pick a brand that could be as inclusive as possible. And then we also knew like we wanted to build a business that would have a lot of traction on the internet. And so having a brand that was easy to say and spell and remember and get the domain and all the handles associated with it, like was important. So we looked into that before we picked a name. So that's kind of how we landed with Winnie. It sort of had all those qualities, and we were able to get the domain winnie.com, which was really important for our like kind of strategy of like we rank in search, but then ideally we're gaining enough traction in a region that people just remember us and can say like, oh, you're looking for daycare? Go to Winnie. You're looking for your preschool? I found mine on Winnie. And then when they type in Winnie, it takes them to
the domain name itself, though, that's like a oneword.com. It can't have been easy. I'm guessing that wasn't available. You must have had to have purchased that from someone else, I'm guessing.
We did have to buy it, but it was not being used. And I think like it is important when we had a domain broker, but it is important to do a bit of that research beforehand.
Yeah.
Because like if we would have picked google.com, there was no possible way in the world we could have ever gotten that domain. But we picked one that was not being really used or valued by anyone.
Exactly. Like you wanted to have been like an adult entertainment site prior to switching to Winnie. That would have had a bad sort of history to connect with. Just a little curious too, maybe now I'll say second last question here, Sara. You're working with your co-founder and now it's been, I'm sort of doing the math in my head. We raise 9 million around. You're probably looking at 50 million-ish valuations, depending on up or down. But that's huge. That's amazing. Like you two must be, obviously very proud of what you've done. No doubt you see a big future as well. So lots of work to do still. How are you two enjoying working together still, since it was just you at the beginning and no doubt a bigger team now?
Yeah, I mean, like the co-founder relationship, it is for me very similar to a marriage. It's a long-term commitment, and you have to work at it. It's not just this thing that's always going to be the best times ever, and you go through highs and lows, and you really want someone that is going to be with you through all of that. My co-founder Anne is amazing, and we've both kind of been through real highs and lows during this journey of Winnie. My husband got cancer at one point in starting the company. I had 2 additional kids. She had 1 additional kid while we were working on this. She got quite sick at another point. And so there were times when we've both like leaned in, times when we've had to lean out and cover for the other one. I really didn't understand how critical a co-founder is to the kind of lasting position of your company. I really do not believe, I don't believe I could have parented my kids without my husband. I don't believe I could have gotten Winnie this far without my co-founder. I know people do it, and there are tons of single founders and there are tons of single parents. But for me, like those 2 relationships have been so critical. I don't believe I personally could have done it without the support of my co-founder.
Yeah, it really is like a marriage. I have a co-founder too for my own company, and it is very much like not just making business decisions, but managing everything around life as well. So yeah. Last question. What is a day in the life of Sara like at the moment? I'm imagining it's not like when the company was first started, when it was you probably sitting at a computer creating product. Now you're doing hiring, you're fundraising. But what is a typical day for you like?
Yeah, it's like so much less exciting during COVID because it's basically me getting out of bed, maybe showering, and going into my office and locking the door so my children don't come in and disturb me. But as far as like what I spend my time and energy on, it's really never the product. And I think that has been the hardest thing for me as a product person, as someone who loves getting into the weeds and working on the nitty gritty. Knowing that like that is not the best use of my time. One of the top things I spend my time on is communication. It's communicating internally, like what is important at any time, and making sure that everyone has the right context to make decisions and to build, independently of me. And it's, external communication to our board, to investors, to potential investors. It's to our customers and potential customers. I often feel just like a broken record. I'm often repeating the same things. And I think it's really underestimated how important that is. So I end my days a lot of times with like no voice. I think I'm having that now, but like it's because you're just doing a lot of communication, and it is like that is kind of your main value as a leader, is like you hold all the context and you need to make sure that other people have that context to be able to kind of expand and scale what you could do yourself.
I'm glad your voice has lasted all the way to the end of this episode, Sara. So anything else you want to throw at everyone before we wrap up the interview?
No, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
No, I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing, the whole story, the early days and everything you're doing now. I feel like we're kind of catching you maybe round 1 of 3 or 4 for Winnie, with lots of potential growth in your future. So I look forward to watching how everything goes. And yeah, thank you for sharing the story.
Awesome. Thank you so much.